baby is crying, not whimpering, not fussing, screaming, and you're standing in an open prehistoric landscape at night. Predators can hear that sound from kilometers away. Every second that baby keeps crying is a second your group's location is being broadcast to everything dangerous in the surrounding dark. This was not a parenting inconvenience. This was a survival emergency. Ancient humans solved it in ways that modern parents have almost entirely forgotten. The first thing to understand is why human babies cry so much in the first place. No other primate infant cries as frequently, as loudly, or as persistently as a human baby. A baby chimpanzee that is being adequately cared for almost never cries. A human baby cries even when it is being held, fed, and kept warm. This seems irrational until you understand what it actually is. It is a demand signal. A human infant is born with a brain that is only 30% developed. It needs years of intensive external input to finish building itself. That means it needs attention, stimulation, and social contact far beyond what most other animals require. Crying is how it demands that input. Not because something is wrong, because the brain itself requires constant engagement to develop correctly. But in the ancient world, loud, persistent crying was also genuinely dangerous. Predators learned to associate infant distress sounds with vulnerable prey. In documented studies, large predators, including lions, have been observed actively moving toward the sound of crying human infants. Every second of uncontrolled infant crying in the open was a second of risk. Ancient humans understood this at a practical level, long before anyone had words for it. And they developed responses that were not just effective, but in many cases more effective than most of what modern parents reach for first. The most powerful was also the simplest: movement. Constant, rhythmic movement. Researchers studying the transport response in human infants found that being carried by a moving adult triggers a specific neurological cascade in the baby. Heart rate drops. Crying stops almost immediately. The infant becomes calm, alert, and still. This is not a learn. It is hardwired. Ancient humans knew it worked long before neuroscience could explain why. In prehistoric communities, a crying baby was not placed in a static location and attended to from a distance. It was picked up and carried. Always. The idea of leaving an infant lying still in a separate location while it cried would have been unthinkable. Not because of cultural values about closeness, because the noise would have been dangerous. But carrying solved another problem as well. A carried infant is a quiet infant, and a quiet infant is a safe infant. This is part of why baby carriers in some form appear in virtually every traditional human culture on Earth. Not because carrying babies is fashionable, because it has always been the most effective tool for managing infant distress, quickly and reliably. Now here is something that most modern parents find genuinely surprising. Ancient babies probably cried significantly less than modern babies. Not because they were different babies, because they lived different. Modern infants spend large portions of their day in static positions, lying flat in a crib, sitting in the bouncer, resting in a pram. This is historically unusual in the extreme. Ancient infants were carried on a caregiver's body for most of their waking hours. Research comparing infant crying rates in cultures with high carrying rates versus low carrying rates found a significant difference. Infants who were carried for most of the day cried substantially less than infants who spent more time in static positions. Not slightly less, substantially less. Continuous gentle movement of a caregiver walking, working, and moving through daily activities provided a level of sensory input that largely prevented the buildup of distress in the first place. Crying was not being responded to. It was being prevented. There is another ancient strategy that has almost completely vanished from modern Western infant care: co-sleeping, not as a lifestyle choice, as the physiological baseline that human infant biology evolved within. A human infant separated from its caregiver's body at night experiences a specific physiological stress response. Breathing becomes less regular. Body temperature becomes harder to regulate. Levels increase. This is not a psychological response to feeling alone. It is a biological response to proximity withdrawal. The infant body expects to be in contact with a caregiver during sleep. When that contact disappears, the body interprets it as a potential emergency, because in the ancient world, it was an infant separated from its group at night was an infant in danger. The distress response that causes a baby to cry when placed alone in a dark room is not a behavior to be trained away. It is an ancient alarm system responding exactly as it was designed to respond. Ancient humans knew nothing about this neurologically, but they knew the solution. They kept the infant close, always close. Separation that modern parents are routinely advised to create between themselves and their sleeping infant is, from an evolutionary standpoint, recent and highly unusual experiment. But movement and proximity were not the only tools available. Ancient communities also had something that modern parents often lack: other people. Infant care in prehistoric groups was never the exclusive responsibility of one or two individuals. Researchers studying documented hunter-gatherer communities found that crying infants were routinely passed between multiple caregivers, not as a last resort. Standard practice. A grandmother, an older sibling, an aunt, an unrelated community member. Whoever was available and willing would take a crying infant and carry it, move with it, offer it distraction and engagement. The biological reality is that a human infant does not require its specific biological mother to stop crying. It requires any competent, responsive caregiver. Ancient communities provided an abundance of those options. Modern, nuclear households, where one or two exhausted caregivers cycle through all available responses with diminishing effectiveness, represent a poverty of options that the human infant was never designed to operate within. There is one more strategy that ancient humans used that has almost entirely disappeared from modern infant care: noise, continuous, rhythmic background noise. An ancient infant lived in a constant acoustic environment, the sounds of a group going about daily life, voices in conversation, the crackle of fire, movement and activity from multiple people in close proximity. This acoustic richness was not incidental. It was part of the sensory environment that the human infant brain evolved to expect. Research on white noise and its effects on infant distress found that continuous rhythmic sound dramatically reduces crying in human infants, not because the sound distracts them, but because it more closely matches the acoustic environment the infant brain is calibrated to experience. Modern infants often sleep in environments that are far quieter and more acoustically isolated than anything in the human evolutionary past. That silence is not peaceful to an infant nervous system built for constant gentle stimulation. It is unusual, and unusual to an ancient nervous system means potentially dangerous. The solutions that ancient humans used for a crying baby were not complicated. They were not expensive. They were not found in a parenting book. They were movement, proximity, community, and continuous sensory engagement. Four things that the human infant has been expecting from its environment for hundreds of thousands of years. Four things that modern life has made simultaneously harder to provide than at any other point in human history. Drop a comment and tell me which part of this changed how you think about crime. And make sure you are subscribed, because next time we are going somewhere even stranger than this.